All right. I don't have fancy slides like Joe does. So it's going to be your typical Bible Sunday school class, I reckon. What I'd like to talk about today is my responsibility, according to Joe, is to talk about towns, cities. So what I want to talk about today is the city where God would place his name. And I thought it was mentioned in Exodus, but I didn't find anything other than the book of Deuteronomy. So what I want to do first is look at the references that talk about it in Deuteronomy. We're going to have to get some readers, so let's just go around the room, and you can start back there with Roger. That'll be fine. All right. I want to first read Deuteronomy 12, 1 through 14. And if you want to read half and let somebody else read half, that's fine too. Deuteronomy 12, 1 through 14.
No, I can read the whole thing. Just keep it flowing. These are the statutes and judgments which ye shall observe to do in the land, which the Lord God of thy fathers giveth thee to possess it all the days that ye live upon the earth. You shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which ye shall possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains, and upon the hills, and under every green tree. And ye shall overthrow their altars, and break their pillars, and burn their groves with fire. You shall hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the names of them out of the place. Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God, but unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all the tribes to put his name there. Even unto his habitation shall ye seek, and thither thou shalt come, and thither ye shall bring your burnt offerings, and your sacrifices, and your tithes, and heave offerings on your hand, and on your vows, and on your freewill offerings, and the firstlings of your herds, and your flocks. And there ye shall eat before the Lord your God, and ye shall rejoice in all that ye put your hand unto, ye and your households wherein the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. Ye shall not do after all the things that we do here this day, every man whatsoever is right in his own eyes. For ye are not as yet come to the rest and to the inheritance, which the Lord your God giveth you. But when you go over the Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God giveth you to inherit, and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which the Lord your God shall choose to call his name, to dwell there. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, and your heave offerings, and your hand, and of your hand, and all your choice vows which ye vow unto the Lord. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God, ye and your sons and your daughters, and your men servants and your maid servants, and the Levites that is within your gates, for as much as he hath no part nor inheritance with you. Take heed to thyself that thou offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest, but in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes. There thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, and there thou shalt do all that I command thee.
Okay, thank you. All right, he spoke these words when they were over on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and they had not come into the land that they would inherit. What was the land full of with regard to offerings and sacrifices? And don't say idols and all that, but what was it full of that they might be tempted to use?
I'm going to say the existing altars and places, wherever they were set up.
And where were they usually set up?
High places.
The high places, right. The land was just full of high places where people would offer their offerings to their various gods. He did not want Israel to do that. He wanted Israel to come into a specific place that he would choose to offer their offerings, even though they're going to be all over the land from north to south. He didn't want them to just offer an offering wherever they felt like it near their house. All right, so that's the first place. The second place is Deuteronomy 14, verses 22 to 26. And just find somebody back there. Patsy, you want to read that for us? Deuteronomy 14, 22 to 26.
You must surely tithe all the increase of your seed which comes forth from the field year by year. You shall eat before Yahweh your God, and in the place which he shall choose to cause his name to dwell there, the tithe of your grain, your new wine, and of your oil, and the firstborn of your herd and of your flock, that you may learn to respect Yahweh your God always. If the way is too long for you, so that when Yahweh your God shall bless you, you are not able to carry it, because of the place which Yahweh your God shall choose to set his name there is too far for you to go, then you must turn into the money and take the money in your hand and go to the place which Yahweh your God shall choose. And you may spend the money on whatever your soul desires, cattle, sheep, wine, and strong drink, or whatever your soul asks of you. And you may eat there before Yahweh your God and rejoice, you and your household.
Okay, so most of them would have been farmers. And so he says, okay, I want you to take a tithe, a tenth, and bring it to the place where the Lord your God will choose to place his name, and offer it there to him. All right, the third and final place is the most comprehensive. It's in chapter 16, verses 1 through 17. All right, Daniel, if you read some of those and let Holly read the rest.
Deuteronomy 16, 1 through 17.
Correct.
Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto the Lord thy God. For in the month of Abib the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Lord thy God, the flock of the herd, in the place where the Lord shall choose to place his name there. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days thou shalt eat leavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction. For thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt with haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all these days of thy life. And there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coasts 7 days, neither shall there anything of the flesh which thou sacrificest the first day at even remain all night until morning. Thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of these gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee. But at the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name in, there thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at even, at the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt. And thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt turn in the morning and go unto the tents. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly of the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do no work therein. 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee, to begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks until the Lord thy God with the tribute of a freewill offering in thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God, according as the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. And thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God, and thy son and thy daughter, and thy manservant and thy maidservant, and the Levite that is within thy gates, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow that are among you, in the place which the Lord thy God hath chosen to place his name there. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and thou shalt observe and do unto the statutes. Thou shalt observe the feast of the tabernacles 7 days after thou hast gathered in the corn and thy wine.
And thou shalt rejoice in thy feast, thou and thy son and thy daughter, and thy manservant and thy maidservant, and the Levite and the stranger, and the fatherless and the widow that are within thy gates. 7 days shalt thou keep a solemn feast unto the Lord thy God, in the place which the Lord shall choose, because the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all thine increase and in all the works of thine hands. Therefore thou shalt surely rejoice, 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee.
All right, so if they were wanting to follow the ways of God, there were 3 times during the year when they would go to this place where he would place his name. And Holly read all 3 of them in the 16th verse. The Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles or Booths, which was later in the year. All right, so that's the assignment, to go to the place where the Lord would place his name. Now, how would you define what characterized where the Lord would place his name? What set it apart from every other city in the land? I'm going to give you a hint. There was more than one place that the Lord would call his name. I'm talking about, how would you define it? All right, so you've named a couple. What set them apart?
Well, the ark was there.
The
and
ark was there.
That's where they offered sacrifices.
Okay, I think that's the right answer. The place where the Lord would place his name is the place where the ark would come to rest. All right, so in the history of Israel, once they left the wilderness, once they got into the land, how many places met that definition of where the ark would rest? And I'll clue you, it's more than what you think.
Including places where the ark rested, let's say, after he was taken from the Philistines?
Yep.
Okay.
I will, it's not one you typically think of, but I will give you credit for that one. All right, Leah, give it a shot.
The house of Obed-Edom.
Okay, that's one. I want them all.
Okay, and then there was what's the guy's name? I can't remember his name.
All right, you mentioned Shiloh. You mentioned Jerusalem. I'll give you a hint. There were 2 more. One of them is you would not typically think of, at least I didn't. And one of them, the other one is be obvious if you thought about their journey. What's that?
He was a Jebusite,
Who?
whoever it was.
No, that's not what I'm thinking. That's not what the Bible talks about. All right, I'll give you the first one. The first one was Gilgap. That's where they first entered the land. So the ark was there for a while. All right, what's the one you're missing? So one that everybody would miss, or 90% of the people would miss. It was a city called Mizpah. That was between Gilgal and Shiloh. All right. Now I want to make reference to something that I think may play into where the ark came to rest at various points in Israel's history. And that is 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. And you can get your dad to read that, or Leah or somebody. 1 Chronicles 5, 1 and 2.
1 Chronicles 5, 1 and 2. Here is a record of the descendants of Reuben, Israel's firstborn. He was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's marriage bed, his birthright was transferred to the descendants of Israel's son Joseph. As a result, Reuben is not enrolled in the genealogy according to the birthright. Even though Judah became prominent among his relatives, that is, the commander-in-chief, will be his descendant, nevertheless, the right of the firstborn went to Joseph.
All right. What was the most obvious fulfillment of that? The right of the firstborn went to Joseph. Come on, it's very obvious.
His children were blessed really in more abundance than the other.
Yeah, he got 2 tribes, right. 2 of the 12 tribes went to Joseph's 2 children. Okay. One that is not quite so obvious is the first king was from the descendants of Joseph. And I think in relationship to that, the first places where the ark came to rest were in lands that were inherited by the descendants of Joseph. And I don't have a map to show you, but I'll just tell you. Gilgal was in the land inherited by Manasseh, Manasseh being Joseph's firstborn son, although we typically think of Ephraim first, because that's the way that's who Jacob gave the blessing to, but Manasseh was actually the firstborn. Mizpah was in the inheritance of Benjamin, Joseph's brother. Shiloh was in the inheritance of Ephraim, Joseph's other son, and finally Jerusalem was in the inheritance of Judah. The house of Benedict. Anybody know what city that was in? You got 2 choices because it's listed 2 different ways.
Rudolph. Saul's a Benjamite. That's not a descendant of Joseph.
You're right. Yes, you're right. It was a son of Rachel. That's what I was thinking. All right. Benjamin is not a descendant of Joseph. That's true. All right. House of Benedict was Kirjath-jearim. Kirjath-jearim was in Judah. And 2 Samuel, it says it was in Gibeah. That was also in Judah. Probably it must have been the same town. We'll get to Gibeah later. We can look in verses of Joshua to show that both Gibeah and Kirjath-jearim were in Judah, although the more famous Gibeah is in Benjamin, that's talked about in the book of Judges. All right, so that's what I plan to do, is to talk about these cities and their involvement in the history of Israel. So we'll start with Gilgap, because that was the first one. Remember, when they first crossed the Jordan River was flooded, and it parted just like the Red Sea parted, and let them cross on dry land. All right, do you know what the name Gilgal means? Yeah, pretty close to that. Yeah, I've got rolling, but wheel would be the same idea. All right, so when they first came across the Jordan River, that's where they camped until the inheritances were worked out. And you can find, after certain battles in Joshua 10, they returned to camp at Gilgal, and also in Joshua 14. Now, I don't know if it's related to that, but Samuel, who followed, he was the last judge, he went on a circuit year after year after year. And does anybody know what 3 cities he went to on a circuit? And I'll give you a hint, one of them is Gilgal. Does anybody recall the other 2? Not Ramah. Not Ramah. Give you a hint. We already named one of them is Mizpah. Mizpah's one. And Bethel is the other one. All right, so when Samuel first anoints Saul as king, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 10. All right, 1 Samuel chapter 10, if you look at the first few verses, it talks about Samuel anointing Saul as king. And So look at, all right, he tells them what's going to happen about the men going to God at Bethel in verse 3. And he says in verse 6, the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you. And in verse 8, he says, while these things happen, God, it's a sign that God's for you, and you shall go down before me to Gilgal, and I will come down to you and offer burnt offerings and sacrifices of peace offerings. 7 days you shall tarry till I come to you and show you what you shall do. All right, so that seemed to be, Gilgal was a central place in the life of Samuel and Saul. In chapter 15 is the record of Saul being commanded by Samuel to slay all the Amalekites. And he did so except the exception of the king. And so in verse 33 of that, Samuel slayed the king in Gilgal. All right. So it remained a place where they crossed the river. When David fled from Absalom and crossed on the other side of the Jordan River, when he crossed back to across Gilgal. Gilgal became a place not associated with people like Samuel, but a place associated with wickedness in the later part of Israel's history. Hosea and Amos speak of it mostly. Go to Hosea 9. Let's see. Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea. Okay. Hosea 9:15. Very good. All right. Find the reader.
Just verse 15.
Yes, please.
Every evil of theirs is in Gilgal. There I began to hate them because of the wickedness of their deeds. I will drive them out of my house. I will love them no more. All their princes are rebels.
So in Gilgal, instead of being a place where the ark rested and it was a center of worship, it became a center of wickedness. And that is repeated several times in Hosea and Amos. All right, so I want to move on to Mizpah. Mizpah means watchtower. Anybody know that? And it was in the part of the inheritance of Judah. Let's see. All right, the reason we know that it is a place where the ark rested, and it's not well known that it is, but it is in Judges 20. All right, what What is Judges 19 about? You're familiar with it. You may not know it's in Judges 19, but you're familiar with the story.
It's about a Levite who his concubine left him. She went back to her father's house, and he went to go get her and bring her back home. After staying at his father's house for a number of days, he left later on in the evening, and instead of staying in Jerusalem, because he knew that unbelievers were there, he decided to stay. What city was it?
Gibeah.
Was it Gibeah? Okay, he decided to stay in Gibeah, and it was the same story as kind of what happened to the angels when they went to Sodom to rescue Lot. There was a man who came out and asked him, to stay with him, and they said, okay, but then the men of the city came to knock on the door, and he basically gave his concubine to them, and she died at their hands from being abused by them. And then he cut her into 12 pieces and sent them out into all Israel, and brought the whole tribes of Israel together to decide how they were going to handle this. And basically they went to war against the tribe of Benjamin.
Right. There was 11 tribes against Benjamin. So read verse 1 of chapter 20.
Then all the people of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, and the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah.
Yeah, so they all gathered unto the Lord at Mizpah. And I took that to mean that that's where the ark was at the time. And, all right, so they fought against Gibeah. All right, so they wanted to fight against Gibeah. They wanted Benjamin, the men of Benjamin, to turn the city of Gibeah over to them. And Benjamin said, we're not going to do it. So then there was this war between Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, and the other 11 tribes. And they prayed to the Lord, the 11 tribes prayed to the Lord for guidance. And the Lord said to go ahead and attack, and Judah shall go first. So they attacked, and what happened? They were defeated by Benjamin. And that happened not once, but twice. They lost 22,000 men the first time, and 18,000 men the second attempt. That was in verse 25, the other was in verse 21. All right, so they're kind of getting concerned, and so they burn off these peace offerings again. So then they try a different tactic, and what they do is they draw the Gibeonites out of the city, and then they defeat them. In verse 35, it says they slew 25,100 men of Benjamin. How many of Benjamin were there to start with? $26,700. Yes. All right. So Benjamin lost most of their men, and then the rest of Judges is about how we're going to get wives for the remaining Benjamites, because we made this vow that we would not give our daughters to them to marry. So they came up with a couple of schemes to find wives for the remaining men of Benjamin to marry. Now, who was the most famous son of Gibeah of Benjamin? Saul. How did you know that? All right, so you know where that's found? I'll give you a hint. It's not found where you think it's found. It's not found in 1 Samuel 6 or something, wherever Samuel first anoints Saul. But you're right, Saul is the most famous son to come out of Gibeah, and the reference is 1 Samuel 10, verse 26. It says, Saul went home to Gibeah, and since he was a Benjamite, it would have been the Gibeah in Benjamin, not the Gibeah in Judah. All right. So, back to Mizpah. Let's see. First Samuel 7. And I think that's basically where Samuel anoints Saul and tells Israel to go to Mizpah. Let's see. Okay, so this is, if you in the first couple of verses, it's where they bring the ark back from the Philistines. All right, so it says in verse 2, the ark abode in Kirjath-jearim. It says it was there 20 years, but you read later that David retrieved it from the house of Benedict, so it seems to have been more than 20 years. But anyway, all right, so read verses 3, 4, 5, and 6.
So the Israelites put away their Baals and Ashtaroths and served the Lord only. Then Samuel said, Assemble all Israel in Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. When they had assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they feasted, and there they confessed, We have sinned against the Lord. Now Samuel was serving as leader of Israel at Mizpah.
Okay. All right, so Mizpah, as far as where the ark is not there anymore. We know that because, oh, wait a minute. The ark at this time has been in the house of Benedict, which is in Judah. Before that time, before it was captured by the Philistines, it was in Shiloh. Although the ark is no longer in Mizpah, Mizpah has a certain place in the affairs of Israel. And after the interaction of Saul and Samuel, the next place that you see Mizpah mentioned as prominent is way into the future, when the Babylonians take Judah captive, and they leave a few people there, and they set up a man named Gedaliah to be governor over the remaining Jews in the area. And if you look at 2 Kings chapter 25, verses 23 to 25. Can we get somebody to read? All right, start with 22 and read through 25.
And as for the people that remained in the land of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon had left, even over them he made Gedaliah the son of Ahikam the son of Shaphan ruler. And when all the captains of the armies, they and their men, heard that the king of Babylon had made Gedaliah governor, there came to Gedaliah to Mizpah even Ishmael the son of Nethaniah, and Johanan the son of Kareah, and Sariah the son of Tanhumeth, and the Nephthalite, and Jezaniah the son of Maccathite, they and their men. And Gedaliah sware to them and to their men, and said unto them, Fear not to be the servants of the Chaldees, dwell in the land, and serve the king of Babylon, and it shall be well with you. It came to pass in the 7th month that Ishmael the son of Nethaniah, the son of Elishama, the seed royal, came, and 10 men with him, and smote Gedaliah, that he died, and the Jews and the Chaldees that were with him at Mizpah.
Okay. So there are a couple of other places where Mizpah is mentioned, but that's the place where it has a place, it's a place of prominence, again, in the affairs of Israel. All right, so I'll now move on to Shiloh. Shiloh is best known, why? It's best known where the ark rested, why? Right, it's because that's where it was when Eli was the high priest, and Samuel, of course, is the famous individual who came at that time and became the last judge of Israel. That was not the beginning of it being at Shiloh. If you go to Joshua 18, and verse 1. Jessica, you?
Then the whole congregation of the sons of Israel assembled themselves at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there, and the land was subdued before them.
All right, and right after that, they wanted to divide the land between the 7 tribes. Now, the question becomes, we mentioned later in Judges, the people gathered to the Lord at Mizpah, and I said, for that reason, I thought that the ark was at Mizpah at that time, but if it's in Shiloh here in the days of Joshua, it's in Shiloh at the days of Eli and Samuel, then maybe the ark was never at Mizpah. Maybe that's a misinterpretation on my part to say that it was. Judges?
Judges 20, verse 27, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days.
Thank you for rescuing me. All right, Judges 20, 27. Okay, good. I did not write that one down. All right, so it was at Shiloh. It got moved to Mizpah. Then it got back to Shiloh. It's what looked like it happened. All right, so if you go to Judges 18, it makes an interesting comment about that, about the ark. Judges 18, '31 is the verse, but this is Judges 18 is where this fellow named Micah makes, I think it's his mother, makes an idol. And he takes his mother's silver and gold or something, and he makes an idol, and then he becomes a priest. No, I get the story mixed up. Does he become a priest until this Levite comes along? All right. Anyway, sorry I'm not explaining that very well, but look at verse 31. It says, they set up Micah's graven image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So it was there, that graven image, the people of Dan worshiped the graven image for a long time, because we know it was in the ark, it was in Shiloh up until the time of Eli and Samuel. So it wasn't just a few years, it was a pretty good while. Let's see. So once the Philistines captured the ark, all right, the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, I think my time's up actually, but they took the ark with them to battle. The Philistines captured it and never came back to Shiloh again. It sat in the house of Benedict and until David moved it to Jerusalem. All right. There is a little bit more about Shiloh. I won't go into it now, but final question is, who ended I won't call it a reign, but who ended the office of the sons of Eli being priest? Who stopped the line of Eli's descendants being priests of the Lord? Who?
I don't remember his name, but when David was running from Saul, this guy was there, and he was an Edomite.
Oh, yeah, okay. You're thinking of the man who he's. That's not right. He did kill a lot of the sons of the priest. It's true.
Solomon's reign, I think.
The answer is Solomon.
There you go.
Why did Solomon stop the line of Eli's descendants being priests?
Because
what fatal mistake had a man's name was Abiathar? What fatal mistake did he make?
Abiathar supported David's other son when he claimed the throne.
What son did he support?
There are so many. I don't remember the name of this one, but
the answer is Adonijah. And so he sided with Adonijah, so Solomon put him out from being priest, and that's why the sons of Zadok were the priests from then on. All right, thank you for your patience.